Hello, welcome to Pacific School of Innovation and Inquiry. I'm Jeff Hopkins. I'm the founder and co-principal of the school. We're going to take you through a little bit of an information session that we often do when people come into the school live, when they're trying to find out a little bit more about the school, sometimes for registering their children to the school, or just to find out more about it. So we thought we'd put one online for people who are unable to do that. Our website address is just at the bottom there, learningstorm.org, and you can go there for more information. It might be how you found this one or on our social media platforms. We're located in Victoria, BC, Canada. Just want to start by acknowledging and thanking the Lekwungen people, also known as the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, for allowing us to learn and work on these unceded lands. Lekwungen means place to smoke herring, and Lekwunganathan refers to the language of the land. Lekwungen traditionally and still to date unites the Esquimalt and Songhees peoples as one people. To talk about our school requires us to sort of start with talking about the foundation upon which it's built. And this was well before we started the school. This was thinking over many, many, many years, lots of research, lots of comparative research as well, to arrive at this diagram that does a pretty good job of showing how we see learning and how we approach it here at the school. It is learner centered, and that's why you see learner right in the middle there in the yellow or the gold color. Lots of people say they're learner centered, and I think they want to mean that. We also really mean that. When we say that here in an inquiry based school, what that means is everything actually starts with the interests that the learner has, the curiosities that they have about the world. Curiosity is a necessary part for learning, and it's a big way to gauge readiness for learning as well. Without curiosity, you don't have the sort of positive discomfort that you need to actually learn things. If you're learning, it means you're a little bit uncomfortable, and it's usually because there's something you really need to know or want to know, and that's going to actually make things feel more comfortable to you. But while you're going through the process, it's a little bit uncomfortable. So the learner is at the center. Surrounding the learner in our diagram, you see this pentagon, with 5 pieces, and you can see that those pieces we call them valued human attributes. And what those are essentially those things that you actually really want to know about how your child is doing at school, or even if you're the learner, how am I doing? Yes, you want to know how you're doing in your courses, but that sometimes gets in the way of what is actually going on, which is you developing as a human being. So in our school, creativity and contribution, what do I contribute to the community? What do I add to the world? Big question that most adolescents have, as is, what is the nature of my connection to others in interdependence and open-mindedness? Ethical awareness and practice, we don't teach people what's right and wrong, but we do want people to develop a sense of what is right and wrong, how does it guide their actions, how does it change the way they know things, that sort of worldview piece. But then also, how do they know what sort of screen are they using to decide if something is right or wrong, including when they're in an ethical dilemma where you've got a right situation you have to decide, or a wrong situation. Proficiency and understanding, that's where most schools kind of focus. Even there, though, we really like to get into the depth of learning. We want people to really understand their learning, as opposed to just sort of checking off behavioral outcomes. And we'll get to that in a minute. And then the self-awareness and authenticity is, how well do I know myself? Who am I when I'm by myself, and who am I when I'm with other people? Are those people different? If they are, why? Is that a problem? Is it okay? How in control of it am I? So all of these things are quite important as humans. I think particularly important as adolescents, because they're learning all of this at that time in their life. So that is kind of almost like our silent curriculum that's underneath everything, although we do talk about it overtly as well. So we try to have it completely silent. The curriculum that people sort of focus on the most, I guess, though, would be the one that's just outside of that one in our diagram. And those are the things that are in gold here, the 8 competencies that surround those human attributes. Lots of jurisdictions in the world have gone to competency-based learning, and that's not a new thing, but it is something that we take very, very seriously, and we make it the forefront, to the degree that we try to de-emphasize the idea of subjects and courses, because we find that really gets in the way of competency development. People stop thinking about how they are learning, and they start thinking about checking off boxes again on a set of prescribed outcomes. In BC, we have a curriculum that combines a set of prescribed outcomes with a set of competencies. And fortunately, we're able to focus on those competencies, and that tends to take care of those outcomes as well, which is great. So we do focus on those, and we help our learners do that. A little different for most people. They're used to often focusing on outcomes, and all of a sudden they're not. But we help them do it, and once they get the hang of it, they really like it. So our competencies, reading, writing, speaking, and listening, personal responsibility and planning, mathematical literacy, cultural awareness and understanding, all those ones around the edges. Quick walk through them. So reading, writing, speaking, listening, that's very kind of straightforward, kind of clear. You can understand what that is. Most people, get what that means. Information and media literacy, this is where we are helping people understand the information that is coming into them, whether they want it or not, but also how to find the information that they do want. How do you search for things? How do you know that you're getting quality information in your research? That sort of thing. Very, very important these days, as we all know. Collaboration and leadership is that it's not so much doing something as a group and then doing a project or a presentation together and everybody gets the same mark. This is more about how do you collaborate? What does leadership mean? It means a lot of different things. There's lots of different ways to lead. Do you want to lead? That's important too. But helping people understand that there's a set of skills that are embedded in good collaboration, good collaborative work. It's not just something you just do and then sort of see how it turns out. That can be very stressful. And you've probably all experienced that situation where either you're the person in a group where you feel you're doing all the work, or you'd like to be the one doing all the work because nobody else is taking it seriously, or you're the one who's saying, I really hate this and I'm going to do as little as I can, or you don't like the way someone's taken over, whatever it might be. There's all kinds of things that happen. And rather than just do that and then pretend that isn't actually part of the learning, we make that part of the learning. So that is a competency in and of itself. Ecological literacy. Yes, this talks about things like natural ecology, sort of environmental ecology, but also ecology in general, which is the idea that there are interrelated elements inside a system. So it's systems thinking, really. This is something that we were disappointed was missing from the BC curriculum. We think it's really important. And we feel like this is something that often people miss in their lives, is the really complex nature of interrelated elements in a system, as opposed to like a direct transactional relationship between one thing and something else. This thing causes that. It's like, this thing might cause that and that and that and that. And some of them are intended, some of them are unintended. And the way you actually address something may be less direct than you think. So systems thinking is big. Critical and creative thinking, we put them together because we think they're not separate. People often think of them separately, but a critical thinker without some creativity isn't particularly useful most of the time. And a creative thinker without some critical skills is not particularly useful much of the time. You need them both to get somewhere. And we, again, really want to show people how to do this well, and all the different tools and approaches you can take to both kinds of thinking to really understand how it could apply to anything that you're doing. Cultural awareness and understanding is getting beyond just the names and the dates and the factoids about culture, but also really understanding it. What culture are you in? What's your worldview? Where did it come from? How can it be different from someone else's? Really, really important to have that understanding if you're going to actually kind of go out in the world and, be sensitive to the things you need to be sensitive to, but also, observing the things that are important to observe. Mathematical literacy. This is not just doing math. A lot of people do math, or most people do math before they get to high school. We often find people who have done math possibly very, very well and have got, A's all the way through, from kindergarten up, come here and we kind of test their mathematical literacy, and we find out that they often don't have much. Or the other way around, we find someone has tremendous mathematical literacy and hasn't been very good at that sort of procedural math that they tend to get tested on in school. What we like to do is kind of get underneath those procedures and help people really understand, what are you doing? What does math mean? What is it representing? How could it represent things that you sometimes don't traditionally think it does represent? Can you use mathematical thinking in art? Can you use artistic thinking in math? Really helping people mix it up. And this is something that is often a very big step for people who come into our school, where the way they see themselves in relation to mathematical literacy changes significantly, and then we help them in a very positive way towards deepening that mathematical literacy. Personal planning and responsibility. This is just what it sounds like, but again, you'll often hear people say, "Oh, how come these young adults can't do X or Y?" Well, did you ever give them a chance to try it? Did you give them a chance to try it without risk, where they weren't being assessed or evaluated, where they were actually responsible for some planning for themselves, as opposed to here's your timetable, and then within the timetable, here's your assignment, it's due on such and such a day. Help people figure out how to do that themselves, and so we do that big time here in the school. So those are the competencies that we use to measure learning. And then in the background, teachers translate the learning and those competencies into the courses where they apply, because in BC, the way you graduate is still by completing courses, which are, sort of collections of experiences and skills and knowledge in sort of a container. We don't use those containers, but we translate everything back into those containers so that someone can graduate. Again, we try to keep that away from the learners as much as possible, because we find as soon as we show them the containers, they stop thinking about their own questions and curiosities, and the inquiry kind of comes to a halt. So what is inquiry? First of all, in inquiry, what we really like about it is that people tend to get into the depth of knowledge as opposed to just knowing about things. They actually know the things. And we measure depth, and I'll talk to you about how we do that later. We don't want people to just memorize things and regurgitate them, or learn the concepts the teacher wanted everybody to learn and that's it. We want people to really, really experience their learning, really get into the questions they have about the world. We want them to internalize their learning and really test out concepts that they come across, whether we're teaching them those concepts or they're finding them somewhere else. How do you know that's a good concept, or a robust or valuable one? And then we want to get, again, kind of mentioned this, but getting beyond the coverage of curriculum. Good friend of mine I worked with in the Gulf Island School District talked about uncovering curriculum as opposed to covering it. And that's always stuck with me. I think it's a really good way of thinking of it. But even the curriculum itself is not the be all and end all. And it's just a suggestion about a way to learn about some really big ideas that are mentioned in the curriculum, but the way the curriculum is designed doesn't necessarily get you to the depth that you might want to get to. So it's a great starting point, but we like to go beyond that. And then again, interdisciplinary thinking, where like outside of school, if you want to learn something, you don't say, is this social studies? Is this, math? Is this English? You don't do that. You just learn the thing. You mix it all together. I know some people don't like it when all the food touches each other on a plate. Well, too bad. That's the way it actually works. That's the way the world is. And so interdisciplinary learning is actually quite important for people to understand that concepts translate across the boundaries, the artificial boundaries that we've created that are called disciplines. They were never intended to direct your learning. They were developed for a completely different reason. And so, but that's another video for another time. The other thing that we like about inquiry is it's a lot easier to help people stay in the zone of proximal development, or that sweet spot that Lev Vygotsky pointed out, that is between that comfort zone where you're not learning anything, the knowledge you already have and the experiences you've already experienced they're not helpful in terms of learning. There's something you need to build beyond. And then the opposite of that, which is if something is so far beyond your current knowledge and experience that you can't even grasp it, that's also not very useful, and there's not going to be a lot of learning going on there either. The behaviors that you often see when people are in one of those two extremes or the other is kind of the same. If you already know everything and a teacher's planned a lesson that is you already know it all, it's pretty boring, and so you disengage. You might, in a school setting, nod off, doze off, misbehave, bug people, or just kind of not even go in the first place. You just don't go to your class. Same with if it's way too far beyond your reach, you also do all the same things because you can't engage in that learning. It's not possible to do so. So if you want real engagement, you want to hit people in that zone of proximal development that's right in the middle, which is just outside the edge of your current knowledge and experience, but not so far away that you can't like feel like you could get there. It's uncomfortable, but a good kind of discomfort. This is different for each learner. So because it depends on what you've experienced, what you're ready for, when the timing is right, um, you can't really do this 100% of the time, or even probably even 20% of the time when you have 25 people in a room and the teacher tries to decide how to hit this zone for everybody. It's very hard. So in an inquiry model where we're building the curriculum in a responsive way based on what learners are curious about, and then facilitating that learning with them, it's kind of automatically in the zone of proximal development because people are ready because they're asking for it. So this is something we do all the time. The process itself is very simple. It's a 5-step process. And really all we've done is formalize the way human beings learn. So you develop a set of questions, and we help people develop good questions and sometimes even unearth the fact that they actually have questions about the world, because we kind of taught people not to do that in a lot of formal education settings, which is, we don't care about your questions. We already have all the things you need to know laid out for you. Well, we go back to the way humans learn. And again, if you think about babies, when they're born, they open their eyes, they see things, that develops curiosity. So their eyes move around, and then when they can turn their head, they do because they want to see more. And when they can crawl, they do because they want to see more. It's their questions. They need to go out and answer them. So we help people do that formally. After you generate some questions, you do a bit of initial research, and that research can look like lots of different things. And in fact, I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But the idea is you deepen your questions and maybe expand them by doing a little bit of research. Once you've done the research, you're not done. And in a lot of places that say they do inquiry-based learning, that's it. You have a question, you do research, you report on it, you're finished. For us, that's really just the beginning. Once you've done research, you develop a new set of questions that are deeper or reframed or whatever it might be, somehow refined based on what you found in your initial research. Those now turn into the foundation for a set of learning activities that you develop or co-develop with the teacher. And then those learning activities are the things you follow. And those are the things that take you deep into the learning, well beyond just research. It could be more research, but it's likely quite a bit more than that, usually more experiential than that. And you just kind of carry out those learning activities, being assessed all along the way through this whole process. You are being assessed, the assessment of your learning, so the typical kind of assessment, which is, what have you learned? Assessment for learning, which is based on what we're seeing, what you've learned and how you've learned it so far, what's next? What would make the most sense in the next step in your development? In a particular competency or competencies. And then as learning, which is when you share assessment practices with learners where teachers aren't doing the assessment all by themselves, with a red pen at night. That's actually evaluation, but anyway, we'll get into that. Also another video for another time. But assessment as learning is when someone realizes, as they're seeing how they are being assessed, they realize that in and of itself is helping them learn more about what it is they're trying to learn about, including the learning process. So that's our process. We help people develop different kinds of questions, and I won't spend a lot of time here, but just to say that when you're asking questions, people need a little help making sure those questions are the kind that are going to get you to something that's deep enough to have some inquiry, a line of inquiry. And so, questions about values, cause and effect, theory, system, descriptive, really taking your questions and seeing, can I create questions of each of these types? Does it apply to my curiosity? And quite often they all do, or at least 3 or 4 of them do. And then that helps you get a little bit farther down the road and into depth. An example here, this is from a few years ago, but a learner at the school generating questions. And that first step, they were really interested in sleep and dreaming. And the questions were, does everyone dream? How often? I heard if you die in your dream, you die in real life. Is that true? Are dream interpretations real? What causes insomnia? And how much sleep do you actually need to live? Great questions, early questions. And so they took these questions and went into the research process. This is that research process I was referring to earlier. So getting beyond just looking things up, we really want people to think about, like, what kind of research are you trying to do here? So the type of research: observational, case study, action research, experimental, design thinking, or something else. And then thinking about within those kinds of research, what are the specific methods you're going to apply? So, is it an interview? Is it an experiment, a scientific experiment? Is it a design study? Is it a debate? Is it a conversation? All of those things can be research, not just, but could include looking things up on the internet or in a book. We just don't want people to restrict their notion of research to something somebody else already knows. Because you probably noticed I'm referring to people in the school here as learners and not students. That's because we think learners learn things that could be things that are not just something they study that someone else has learned. And we find that that happens when you follow the inquiry method. People have ideas about things that no one has ever had before, or that they're unaware of. Their original ideas, they're not somebody else's. So they're not students per se, they're learners. They're both, but they're learners, a bigger umbrella that has student inside it. After the research, and in this particular case, you can see the person now has a whole bunch more questions, and they're more refined. So using some terminology that they didn't have before, and even just kind of more getting into more specifics. So some examples here: is lucid dreaming possible, and could it help people address real issues? How have dreams been portrayed in literature? Do different cultures place different levels of importance on dreams? What are the characteristics of sleep stages? What's the difference between nightmares and night terrors? Does a dark bedroom make it easier to dream or remember dreams? So lots of things. They're getting really deep and using words like REM, alpha, EEG, all these things. So it's normal to see people after they've done research to develop a better set of questions. So this is an example. Now that they've done those first three steps, and they've got these questions, now they are ready to develop learning activities to take them to kind of answer these questions, or not answer them always, but address them, get into them. And so some examples from this same person, you can see here some of the things they've co-created. And when I say co-created, that means that a learner is leading the way, but a teacher is definitely helping. So you're not just sitting here by yourself doing everything by yourself, because that is not a school. The teacher would be helping you develop learning activities that make sense, that in terms of time and resources, and is this taking you where you want to go? But really facilitating that process with the learner. So, for example, write a story about a lucid dreamer who harnesses the power of the dream world to develop cures for major illnesses in the real world. Cool idea. Ask a teacher for workshops on character development and suspense creation. So sometimes you say, I need you to teach me a thing, teacher. So this kind of goes back to that zone of proximal development again, where the person in this workshop is saying, I'm ready for this. So I need this. This is the edge. This is my zone of proximal development. I need this. I want my story to be good. I want it to be a page turner. I don't want it to be something that people go, I don't actually care what happens to this character at all. So they ask for lessons. Now, what's cool is when you do this in our school, someone will say, I'm ready for this and I would like this session. The teacher will plan it. It will be on our calendar that's shared. And you can even see our Google Calendar that's on our website and see all the things that are like this. Anyone can go to it who wants to. So someone may not have an inquiry in this area at all, but they see it on the calendar and go, ooh, a writing workshop on character development and suspense creation. I'm going to that. So you might have, 12 or 15 people in this class with you. The one is the person who asked for it and you designed it for, but there's other people there too, and they're all there for different reasons, their own reasons. So everyone is working at their zone of proximal development because they decided to be there. Conduct primary research. At the bottom, you see conduct primary research on the relationship between darkness of the room and dreaming. This was the idea where the person helped people, got participants who volunteered to participate in this experiment. They would gauge the darkness of their bedroom, and they had to come up with a methodology for that. And then they would monitor their own dreams, the degree to which they remembered them, and how much accuracy or how much detail they remembered over a period of time. And it was actually a lot longer than a month because they kept failing and failing with their methodology until they got it right. And then they were able to monitor to see if there was a relationship between how dark or bright a room was and the degree to which people could remember dreams. So great to go through that scientific process. Again, asking for a lesson on that methodology to make sure it was good. And visiting the sleep clinic to see what's going on in there when it comes to sleep things, researching artists who credit dreams as their source of inspiration. So as you can see, all these examples are all over the place discipline-wise. They cover everything, and a lot of them mix disciplines together, and that's kind of how this works. So as people do these inquiries, and they're doing usually multiple lines of inquiry happening at a time, so you don't get sick of your one and only inquiry. You are learning in an interdisciplinary way. But again, in the background, the teachers are pulling this apart, putting it into the course containers where it belongs, and we're monitoring it along the way. If it looks like there's an area that someone's really kind of neglecting, or we don't know what we don't know, this is again where that co-construction comes in, and a teacher might, we call it nudging, sort of say, hey, you're right, go over here, but if you just kind of go over here right now, you can get into some really interesting, I don't know, biology, or really interesting mathematical process, or physics, or something like that, or an art technique that you don't even know exists because you don't know about it. So the idea of the inquiry being the vehicle for all this allows teachers to kind of pay attention and nudge people in certain directions. And it works very, very well. We have tools that make this work, because you can't just say, we do this, but well, how do you do it? So a couple of our tools that we use, these are just a few of them, but Trello is a big one. We've been using it for a long time, and it's a great project management tool that allows you to see, in our case, an inquiry kind of all along the way in moving. You literally move little cards from left to right in states of doneness. And so when a teacher looks at someone's Trello board, you can see, oh, I see this thing is moving along. I can see information you've attached to it. You can tag people and say, look at this with me now, or I'd like to talk to you about this now, or I'm ready to be assessed on something. Trello is a very, very powerful tool. Our assessment framework, something that we came up with in-house that we're very happy with and proud of, and has been downloaded tens of thousands of times from all over the world, is one that allows us to look at each of those 8 competencies, sit with a learner and do an assessment, go through an assessment process, or they can do it themselves too, but go through an assessment process that involves a set of indicators to make sure, are we working in the right competency area here, or like assessing the right one. A set of guiding questions to help us know what to ask to kind of get to the depth, and then a depth indicator that helps people see how deep is my learning here. And so that's been very, very successful. That allows us to eventually come up with things like grades and courses, but it helps people know, what's next. Like if I'm at a kind of a lower level of learning, and as I'm getting into an inquiry, how do I deepen that, and what does deeper look like? And so this is a great tool. And Continuum is something that a friend of ours developed, Andrew McLean. He was studying our school during his master's degree, and realized that we could really use a tool that kind of put everything into one place, so that as we were tracking these assessments, we can see them all individually, but also kind of combined in an aggregate to see how are people doing in all of these competency areas, with all of these inquiries added together. So that's a tool that we've just created in-house to keep track of the bigger picture. When you're a teacher here, you probably already figured this out, but you're not the kind of teacher that a mainstream school requires, which is a tough job. It's a very lonely one, where you are the person who plans, creates, delivers, assesses, motivates, hopefully monitors. You're supposed to be the expert in the thing that you're teaching. You evaluate, you report to parents, and you follow the curriculum for your group of learners. At PSII, the Pacific School of Innovation and Inquiry, the teacher facilitates learning. They are adapting learning conditions to make sure it's appropriate for each learner. So again, that zone of proximal development. You're looking at in and out of school opportunities. So beyond the field trip, but like what is in the community where someone could be learning something in a real way, as opposed to a simulation of that. And sometimes a simulation is fine, but sometimes it makes more sense to just go do the real thing. And also looking for expertise wherever it might be. Sometimes it is within the teacher. Sometimes it's in another teacher. Sometimes it's not in any of the teachers. Someone might have a question that goes way beyond anything we know. And so we would be looking for, mentors, experts in the community, online, whatever it might be, to kind of find the expertise that's needed when that's required. And we do that all the time. So being a teacher is very, very different, and the relationship between the learner and the teacher is really, really different, and it's quite strong here in the school. Um, all inquiry all the time? No, but most of the time. So when you're not doing inquiry-based learning here, typically what happens is someone will come along with a really cool idea that involves other people. They'll say, "Oh, I'm making a movie, or we're putting on a play, and we need other people to be involved." So other people will join in and say, "Oh, I'd like to do that." So it wasn't their inquiry, but it's something they want to do, and so they jump in on that, and they have their own set of goals within that activity or project or whatever it might be, but it's something that came from outside. Just an opportunity kind of came into school and went, yeah, let's do it. Or one learner had an inquiry and it involved others, whatever it might be. And then sometimes, especially when you get to the end of your grade 12 year, or not, in your grade 12 year, we might say, there's a couple of weird little parts of some of these courses that we just can't quite match with your lines of inquiry so far. So we kind of turn it around backwards. We still do inquiry based learning, but we'll say, here's sort of a big piece of, I don't know, chemistry 12 that we need to kind of figure out a way for you to do this. So here are the outcomes. What kinds of inquiry questions might you have that could take you through this part of the curriculum? So that part is a little bit backwards, but it also ends up becoming inquiry based learning in the end. Just doesn't start with the questions. We build the questions to meet the outcomes. And that happens very, very infrequently. That's, again, as people are finishing up courses, sometimes that happens, but very rarely. Um, that's it right now. One other thing I'll mention is that to make all this happen, we have organization groups, and our learners are in small groups of sort of 12 to 15 with a teacher. They meet every day in the morning. Our mornings start at 9:30 and our days end at 3:30. At 9:30 until 10, this small group of 12 or 15 meets with their org teacher in their org group, and it kind of sets up their day and looks at long-term booking assessment times with whoever, booking meetings with other teachers, booking resources rooms, accessing anything. And then after that half hour goes by, that group is on their way. Doesn't mean they never cross paths with that teacher again or other teachers, just that one is every day for sure, without fail. So we always know where everybody is and what they're up to, and if there's any challenges that they're experiencing. Now, I take questions. This is a recording, so the best way to do that is to just send a question to visitors@learningstorm.org by email, and we'll be happy to answer it. We also have a frequently asked questions part on our website that you can find pretty easily, and we might have an answer to your question. We've also done our best to answer them in this presentation. If you'd like another presentation on something specific about the school, again, visitors@learningstorm.org, ask us for it, and we'll do another one. Okay, thanks for your attention.